Hey guys, welcome back to the Cosmic Rose. We're doing a video on the Saturn return today. So if you want to learn a little bit more about your Saturn return, whether it is coming up in astrology or if it's already passed, stick around. But before we go ahead and jump into it, if you aren't already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and do that and smash that like button so you can stay up to date on the current astrology as well as weekly horoscopes, tarot, and spirituality. So let's just jump right into it, guys. The Saturn return is a huge topic, and it's probably one of the most popular topics in the astrology communities right now. So it's a pretty prominent thing in everyone's life. If you aren't familiar with what the Saturn return is when Saturn has came back to its natal position of where it was exactly when you were born. So it's basically made an entire circle around the zodiac and has came back to the exact degree at the exact return of when you were born. So this is usually between 28 and 30. I would say, obviously 29 is a roundabout number. So anywhere from 28 to 30 years old, you will experience your Saturn return. So everyone has a natal Saturn placement depending on sign. It is considered a generational planet to me because it takes about 2.5 years to transit one sign. So if you were born in the same 2.5 year span as someone else, you likely have the same Saturn placement as far as sign goes. You will experience usually 2 or 3 Saturn returns in your lifetime, and it just depends obviously on how old you are by the time you pass away, but the second one is usually around 58 or 59 depending on the person, the sign placement, degree, etc., things of that nature. So when we're thinking about the Saturn return, we obviously have to think about the characteristics of Saturn and what Saturn represents in astrology in general. And then we need to apply the sign placement, the house placement, the aspects it makes, a degree. There's a lot that goes into it. And I do plan on making some astrology fundamentals or astrology 101 videos as well. But I am coming up on my Saturn return. So I thought this was going to be a good topic to cover because Saturn is about to ingress into the sign of Pisces in March of 2023. So, that's in just 2 months, pretty much. And so everyone that has their natal Saturn in Pisces is going to be experiencing Saturn moving into the sign of Pisces because it's really when he moves into the sign that you were born into, you will feel that. You'll feel when Saturn moves into that sign. So if you were born with your natal Saturn in Pisces, you were born between January 29th, 94 and April 8th, 96. And you're going to be experiencing your Saturn return within the next 2.5 years. If you were born with Saturn in Aquarius, you just had your Saturn return or are currently having your Saturn return, and that means you would be born between February 7th, 91 and January 28th, 94. So Saturn in Aquarius peeps, you guys are either going through or you're just finishing out your Saturn return. You're probably just kind of cleaning up the pieces from it. And, I want to start also by saying that the Saturn return is nothing to be afraid of. Honestly, in my experience, Pluto transits are a little more frightening, to be honest. Pluto is the planet that rules death and it also rules rebirth. But the Saturn return is different in nature. And going back to what Saturn represents in the birth chart, the archetype of Saturn is kind of like the strict father figure. And he is father time. He's associated with Kronos, and we always want to look at mythology when we're looking at Saturn because the planets are named after deities. And I won't go too far into the mythology, but if you look at the mythology, maybe go and research the mythology of Kronos and Saturn. Obviously, there are different pantheons from which we get the mythology from, but if you're looking at mythology as a whole, the archetypes and the characteristics of the archetypes remain the same. So Kronos, Saturn, one of the same. It's Roman and Greek. So Saturn is a planet that is associated with responsibility. It is the father figure. A lot of times people look to Saturn or the sun when we're looking at things involving the father. So themes of the father can come up around the Saturn return, especially depending on where it is placed in your chart as far as house placement. But Saturn also rules Capricorn, which is a lot about, tangible results. It is about hard work, discipline, practicality. It's father time, so aging. It's about success and your public persona, your career. It's about taking responsibility for things, and he really has a way of hammering down and snapping you back into reality. So a lot of times during the Saturn return, or when Saturn enters your, the placement where Saturn was at your birth, there's kind of a feeling of a dark night of the soul, and it feels like time is moving extremely slowly. And there can almost, depending on if there is other planets, especially the luminaries in the same house as where Saturn is, you can feel this overall depression or loneliness or just restriction of emotion, even because Saturn does rule things like restriction and constriction. So, you know, it's not a terrible transit that everyone makes it out to be. The Saturn return is really about making us take responsibility. You know, we just went through our 20s. We're coming to the end of our 20s, getting ready to go in our 30s. And it's a reality check in a lot of ways. It's like, you know, he's basically saying, okay, I just went around the zodiac. It took me 29 years and I taught you lessons in all 12 of the signs. So now I'm back to where I was when you were born. And what have you learned from this experience? What have you learned in the past 29 years, and how can we apply it moving forward in your life? Did you learn the lessons associated with each of the signs? And if you didn't, he's going to hammer the hammer down, and he's going to be the wise teacher that he really is, because that's, you know, I like to call him the wise teacher, because he truly is. He's a father figure in a lot of ways. And he's really, what he's doing at the Saturn return is he's setting you up to step up and mature and figure out where you have been lacking in your responsibilities, where you keep pointing the finger and blaming other people for your pitfalls, or, you know, it's not about what happened to you in childhood. It's not about what happened to you in your past relationships. It's not about what happened at work. It's really about what you have done to get where you are today and what you are going to do to move forward. So he really just hones in on that. And, yeah, so when we're talking about, Saturn in Pisces, I just wanted to touch on this because obviously my Saturn is in Pisces, and Saturn is nearing the end of Aquarius, about to move into Pisces in March. So I did want to touch on Saturn and Pisces in general. It's also important to note that Neptune has been in Pisces since 2011. Jupiter just moved through Pisces, and we had a giant transit happen last March. Actually, it was the Jupiter-Neptune, or maybe it was April, but it was the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, and that was an extremely rare transit to happen. So we've already had a lot of Pisces action happening, and still do with Neptune there. Neptune and Pisces, because Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. So I've said in many of my other videos on TikTok and such that Neptune and Pisces is Piscean energy times 1,000, and Piscean energy, actually I do want to touch on what Piscean energy is in general, so we can kind of blend the two together, because I talked about Saturn. But what I was saying is Neptune in Pisces is Piscean energy times 1,000, so it blurs the lines of pretty much everything in reality. And I don't know, just the thought of Saturn coming in there with Neptune in there, it might soften the blow a little bit, honestly, because Saturn and Pisces, if you think about it, they're kind of like polar opposites. So it's weird. It's a weird placement to have in general. But with Neptune there, I almost feel like Saturn coming in, it might smooth it out a little bit, if that makes sense. But so let's just think about the Piscean energy. Pisces is a sign that is the 12th sign of the zodiac. It is associated with planet Neptune. It's spirituality. It is otherworldly. It's our dreams. It is the ethereal. It's everything that isn't intangible reality. So whereas Saturn is tangible reality, Pisces and Piscean energy is the complete opposite. Like I said, it is all things in other realms. It is also associated with, you know, addictions. That's a shadow side of Pisces. It can be associated with confusion, delusion, illusion. It can be, you know, being overly empathetic and compassionate to the point where it's detrimental to your health. Mental health is another big one for Pisces. It can deal with things such as like institutions or jails or places that you feel secluded and lonely. And that's kind of more the shadowy side of Pisces. But when you think about blending the two energies together, Saturn and Pisces, it's kind of like spiritual discipline comes to mind. And or if not spiritual discipline, it can be a restriction of spiritual practices. And that's one of the things that have been thinking about a lot lately, is like religious reform in a way. Like it could go one way or the other. It could be really that the Piscean energy expands Saturn, but honestly, Saturn has a more powerful influence than the Piscean energy does. And the zodiac signs are really ways in which the planets express their energy. So it's almost like coming into this 2.5-year period where Saturn is going to be in Pisces, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a lot of restrictions in the spiritual communities, whether that be on social platforms, social networking platforms of the like, where, you know, posting content about things like this, astrology, spirituality, and stuff like that is restricted. And, you know, mainstream religions try to overcome the spiritual teachings that have been regenerating over the 20th and 21st century. But, yeah, spiritual discipline or restriction of spirituality definitely comes to mind for Saturn and Pisces. And then maybe restriction of emotions, because Pisces is such an emotional sign. And like I said, also if you have the sun or moon or, you know, a personal planet in the same house position or sign that Saturn is in, if it's in Pisces with Saturn, then you'll feel that one a little bit more, maybe a restriction of your emotional side. But it can also be a very introspective placement. So, you know, I do believe that's part of what the Saturn return in Pisces is about. It's about looking within, and, you know, because the divine is within all of us. And I think that's really what a big part of what he's teaching all of us, no matter what house position it's in or what aspects it's making. It's really about looking within instead of looking without and pointing the finger at everybody else like, oh, they caused my problems, she caused my problems. No, you know, look within, take responsibility for what has occurred in your life and where you're headed in your life. And, you know, moving forward, what lessons have we learned and how can we apply that to our life going forward? Also, another thing that came to mind, I think is actually kind of cool about Saturn and Pisces placement, is that because they are polar opposites, I think the combination of Pisces and Saturn has the ability to manifest intangible reality or 3D reality probably more than a lot of people can, because it has a connection to the outer realms, the spiritual and tangible reality. So this might be useful for Saturn and Pisces natives to utilize things like manifestation during their Saturn return. I wouldn't overdo it, just because, you know, you have to look at the chart as a whole, but you know, you might realize some of your manifestations coming to light a lot easier once Saturn does move into Pisces. So and that's another thing I was going to say. I think I did say it in the earlier part of this video, but once Saturn does move into Pisces and your Saturn is in Pisces natally, you're going to feel that sucker. And you'll probably feel it if you have Saturn in Aquarius. You'll probably feel it when he leaves. It'll be like, oh, he's gone. Thank God, you know. It's really nothing to really worry too much about, honestly. It's something we all go through 2 or 3 times in our lifetime. So don't stress out too much about it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I look forward to making more videos on the Saturn return, but this is kind of just an introduction. So I will see you guys on the next one. Love you.